Greetings and felicitations to you all. Peter here with another Star Trek Reflections, not Reactions video, and a warning, I do get into spoiler territory for the original series of Star Trek and possibly some other Star Trek series as well. So you have been warned. If it's a reaction channel you're looking for, I recommend bunnytailsREACTS, a link to her video of the episode we're talking about today, which is the Charlie X episode. In the comments. And without further ado, let's get into that episode itself. Charlie X coming right up. We kick off this episode as usual with a captain's log from Kirk and a massive thumbs up of appreciation for this wonderful opening shot of the Enterprise maneuvering alongside cargo vessel Antares. Now this is a glorious example of remastered effects because in the original version of this episode we didn't even see the Antares. We just saw the Enterprise. We didn't get a shot of this lovely ship, which is quite obviously a Starfleet vessel because it has the familiar nacelles with the NCC and the number on those nacelles. So it's lovely, lovely indeed to see that in the opening shot. And Kirk explains in his log entry that they're coming to rendezvous with the Antares to pick up an unusual passenger. And we see Kirk looking businesslike, exiting the turbolift, headed to the transport room to greet the passenger, wearing his glorious green wraparound tunic, which is always a massive thumbs up from me. I prefer him in this, and this version of it is really, really nice. I go back and forth in terms of which version of the wraparound tunic I like the best. I think it's a tie, to be honest, but he looks great right here in this scene. Peak Shatner at his absolute best. We get into the transporter room. There's no Scotty in here on this episode. There's an extra on there who looks vaguely familiar. I think he's cropped up in the other episodes, but I don't know him as well as I do a Leslie or a Brent or a Hadley. But Kirk says to the chief, okay, begin materialization, which is an unusual way to say it, I thought, as opposed to energize. But energize he does, and on board come the captain of the Antares, Captain Raymart, his navigator Tom Nellis, and a young boy called Charlie Evans, played by an actor called Robert Walker. On the fourth transporter pad out of the six comes Charlie's luggage, which is very, very minimal. Now, a bit of trivia here, you may already have noted, is that the uniforms that the captain and navigator of the Antares are wearing are the old style uniforms that we saw in the pilot episodes, The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before. And they're in that sort of salmon-y colour, pinky colour that I really didn't care for. You'll also note this is the first example we see in the series of where the Starfleet Delta is on the chest of the wearers of said uniforms is different to that of the Enterprise. And this was a precedent that was set in the original series where each ship had its own insignia, and the Delta was only at this point in time for the Enterprise, which is an interesting little tidbit. So there you go. Kirk warmly greets Captain Raymart and his officer, who immediately look a little bit nervous and things seem a bit out of place. Kirk doesn't immediately notice this as he is introduced to Charlie Evans, and there's a bit of a silence, a bit of an awkward silence as Kirk turns back to the officers from the Antares. And then we cut to this shot here of Charlie rolling his eyes into the back of his head in a very, very strange way. It gives me vibes of The Undertaker from WWF/WWE. And at this point, the captain and the navigator of the Antares, and we get a lovely close-up of their insignias here on their uniforms, they become very talkative and they talk up Charlie, saying, wonderful boy, absolutely fantastic, we've really enjoyed having him on board and we don't want to really let him go, but we're not headed in the direction that he needs to go. It transpires that Charlie has been found on a planet called Thasus, all alone. He was the sole survivor of a crash landing there many, many years ago, and has recently been found and is being transported initially by the Antares and now the Enterprise to Earth Colony 5 to be reassimilated into human society. Kirk tries to engage the Antares crew, his comrades, his teammates from another ship in a bit of conversation, asking, is there anything that a larger, more well-stocked starship like the Enterprise can do for the Antares? But the Antares crew seem awkwardly resistant to that idea. They want to get about their way. They're only a small crew of 20 odd, and they're doing just fine, and they need to be getting on their way. All through this conversation, Charlie keeps on interrupting the conversation, and he asks a relevant question, actually, which leads to a nice piece of trivia. How many are on board this ship? To which Raymart answers, over 400 in the crew of a starship. Isn't that right, Captain? To which Kirk replies, 428 to be exact. Now, this is a massive jump from the pilot episode, you will recall, when Pike said in the cage that he was tired of being responsible for 203 lives. So whether that's considered canon or not, and to me it is, that represents doubling the size of the Enterprise crew, which is very, very interesting indeed. And I'd certainly be interested to know the reason why that happened. But anyway, the crew of the Antares depart, and Captain Raymart and Mr. Nellis can't even be tempted into a supply of Saurian brandy, to which Kirk says this must be a starship first, a supply vessel, not needing anything. But anyway, off they go, and very keen to depart they look as well. Now, Kirk and Charlie move towards the door of the transporter room, and in walks Yeoman Janice Rand, who presumably has been summoned here by Kirk to escort Charlie to his quarters, because that's ultimately what she ends up doing. Now, Charlie, who's, you may recall, just remember, he's been stranded, alone, completely alone, allegedly, on this planet for all of his life. He's a 17-year-old boy, and he's never seen a female before. Until recently, he's never seen another human being before. So this shows that the Antares only had male crew members in their small crew. And he looks at Janice, very confused, looks at her, looks back at Kirk, looks back at Janice and says, "Are you a girl?" And then he looks at Kirk and says, "Is that a girl?" And Kirk says with a very, very Kirk wry smile on his face, "That's a girl." And we all know that Kirk is a ladies' man, and that's a really, really cool scene for me, definitely. I love that. Anyway, we've set the scene. That's the end of our teaser, and we move into the glorious opening titles. And immediately after the titles, we get a lovely remastered shot of the Enterprise. Nothing special, just a standard one of it going through space, and we see the title of the episode, Charlie X, there. The best shot I've seen so far of any of the remastered effects, that opening shot with the Enterprise coming alongside the Antares. And we get another captain's log. Kirk sets the scene a bit more about Charlie, explaining the fact that he was the sole survivor of a crash on the planet Thesis many years ago. And during this voiceover of the captain's log, we see Charlie in sickbay. And I have to make a correction from a previous statement that I made in the Corbomite maneuver, where I had said that this feature here that you see now of Charlie pedaling on those exercise pedals on the wall of sickbay, that we only saw those twice in the whole series. And it turns out I was wrong. Now, thinking very, very deeply and carefully here, I think this may be the only other time we see it. We will sure find out as we go along if I need to correct myself again. But I always associate this scene with Kirk on this particular piece of apparatus pedaling with his shirt off, and it bookends the series with the first episode and the last episode. I'd completely forgotten about this particular scene. And what's really good is that we see the awkwardness of Charlie. I mean, we already did with him looking puzzled at a female of the human species with Janice, and his lack of social awareness, where he kept on interrupting Kirk in the conversation with the Antares crew. And here he expresses further confusion in talking to Dr. McCoy about Captain Kirk and saying, well, he is not very like Captain Raymart. To which, and I put the subtitles on for this screenshot here because I love this reference, this very accurate reference from Dr. McCoy here. No, Captain Kirk is one of a kind, Charlie, and isn't that just the case. There's no one like Kirk, and it's a very important line here, which shows us the authenticity, the uniqueness, what makes Kirk special. He's the absolute best at what he does, and he's known throughout the whole of Starfleet for this. He has that reputation, and rightly so. Now, in later versions of Star Trek, the Enterprise would officially be recognized as the flagship of the Federation. And during this 3-season run of original Star Trek and the animated shows, I don't believe it was ever referred to as such. I don't believe it was called the flagship. Retrospectively, I believe it is named so. In Strange New Worlds, for example, I believe it is referred to as the flagship there. So I always consider it so, in my own headcanon, shall we say. But anyway, next we get a great scene where Dr. McCoy escorts Charlie out of sickbay. Charlie's walking through the Enterprise corridors in awe and in wonder of what he is seeing. This is a busy ship in those corridors, and we see crew, men and women at work. And then Charlie pauses, as we can see here, this scene of a crewman who is moving this pole down between decks. And if any of you watching have any idea what this guy's doing, I'd love to know your theories on it. I should look at see if I could find the screenplay and see if there was a description of that. That might be a nice little feature to add into these retrospectives, to look at the screenplays of these episodes if I can get my hands on them. But what this guy's doing here, shoving this pole down shafts between decks, I really couldn't tell you. But this continues. Charlie's getting used to his new surroundings. He's observing people. We see a couple of crewmen in the Jeffries tube working, having a conversation. Now, these two crewmen are immediately recognizable to me. The guy in the blue coveralls is, I don't know the name of his character. He's unnamed as far as I'm aware, but he's the same guy who in The Naked Time was holding the paintbrush and causing mayhem on the lower decks. And the guy in the red coveralls is transporter technician Wilson from The Enemy Within, in what I believe was the second of his only 2 appearances in the show. So they have a little bit of exchange to finish up their work, and the guy in the blue says, "Why don't you hit the rec room? I'll finish up here." And Wilson says back to him, "You got a deal, friend," and he playfully smacks him on the butt and walks away in a very manly way of its time. Charlie notices this and obviously perceives this to be a standard greeting between humans, and this will result in disastrous effects very, very shortly afterwards. He continues to walk around the ship and he sees Janice walking about her business, and it's very obvious immediately after that initial reaction to Janice that Charlie has developed an immediate and quite unhealthy liking for Janice, and he runs after her and he magically produces a bottle of perfume to Janice and says, "I've brought you a present." To which Janice reacts favorably, but curiously she's confused. And Charlie's very, very pleased at her reaction. He's very, very happy with the validation that he's getting in regards to his gesture. And Janice looks puzzled at the scent because it's actually her favorite. And Charlie challenges her, "Isn't it? I thought this was your favorite. Or don't you like that scent?" And then Janice confirms that it's my favorite. How do you get it? They don't have any in the ship's stores. And this does represent a little bit of a thumbs down from me in the fact that how would Charlie have gotten hold of this? Does Janice not think to challenge this a bit more? Although maybe from her perspective, maybe he could have picked this up on the Antares. For what reason, who knows? But it's a little bit of a red flag to me that she wouldn't pick up on this and at least report it at this stage and react a bit differently to it. So Charlie sort of gets a bit clingy here and makes it very obvious to Janice that he's developing a bit of a crush on her, and he says he wants to hang out with her. "Can't you stay and talk?" And Janice takes a bit of pity on him here, says, "Well, I get off duty at such and such a time. Why don't you meet me in the rec room on deck such and such?" I'm normally better at remembering trivial details like what deck something's on. but in this case I can't recall. And she said, and Charlie responds to this in the exact same words that Wilson said to that crewman a few moments ago. "You got a deal, friend?" And he playfully slaps Janice on the butt. To which Janice obviously and appropriately reacts with astonishment and anger and says, "Charlie, you can't just go around slapping girls on the..." And she doesn't say it out loud. And Charlie's very confused and looks a bit remorseful and a bit sorry. "I'm sorry." And Janice doesn't quite know how to explain it to him, so she gets out of jail brilliantly here by saying, "Well, why don't you tell Captain Kirk or Dr. McCoy what you did and let them explain it to you?" And that's a thumbs up for me. That's a brilliant piece of passing the buck from herself there in a very awkward situation. So hats off to Janice there. So in the next scene, we cut to the bridge. Kirk is sat in his command chair on the bridge, shuffling his tapes in all his green wraparound glory. He looks peak Kirk here. He looks wonderful. The hair is perfect. The physique is perfect. I could wax lyrical about how great Shatner looks in season 1. He just looks incredible. Behind him, looking equally great, is Nichelle Nichols as Uhura. She's busy at work. She's compiling a report for Kirk, which he comes over and gives to him in a minute. And over at the science station, Spock and McCoy, best buds, are having a little debate about Charlie and his incredible and miraculous survival on the planet Thasus for the bulk of his life. And Spock is dubious of this, and rightly so. He does not believe that Charlie could have survived unaided. He would have run out of food, by which time McCoy says, well, he would have learned to eat berries and other native things by then. And the fact that Charlie taught himself how to speak, which he earlier told McCoy, he listened to the tapes from the crashed vessel and the memory banks were still working and he learned how to talk that way. There are red flags all around here in terms of Charlie's survival. And Spock comments that Charlie's very presence here in the state he is in as a functional adolescent human. He can walk and he can talk, and he lacks social and emotional awareness, but he can do all the basic human things. This proves that there must be some sort of intelligent life on Thasus. And Kirk comes over and he challenges his most trusted senior officers with taking Charlie in hand and introducing him to the challenges of being a young adolescent boy in a very large universe now that he has entered into. McCoy pushes back on this, saying that you're already a bit of a father figure to him. He looks up to you. This touches back on the conversation earlier where Charlie had asked McCoy about Kirk, recognizing that Kirk had a natural air of authority to him, and Charlie definitely has a sense of respect for Kirk, which is important, at least for a period of time in this episode. So Kirk pushes back, though. He says, I'll rely on your wisdom, the two of you, to provide him with all the guidance he needs. Kirk doesn't want in on this just yet, but he can't avoid it for long. Next, we cut to the rec room in one of my very favourite scenes. This is a massive thumbs up, in my opinion. And the first thing we see in the rec room is Spock playing a musical instrument, and this is called a Vulcan lute. This is a stringed instrument from Vulcan culture, and it resembles a kind of futuristic harp or lyre. It has been called a Vulcan lyre, actually. And he does play this in several episodes of Star Trek, the original series, most notably this one, and a one in season 3 that we will get to in due course. And Spock seems at peace here. He seems relaxed. He seems quite at home in the rec room with his fellow crewmates. Across from him, we see Uhura and Janice playing cards. Everyone's really relaxed here. It looks like a very relaxed area, off-duty time. The one dislike or thumbs down I will give to this scene is that it harps back to what I said in The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before, in that when officers are off duty on the Enterprise for the bulk of the actual 3 seasons, they are very rarely out of uniform, and it would be nice to see them in more casual clothes here. Not that I hate the uniforms, I think everyone looks great in them, but I just felt it brought a sense of more realism seeing people off duty in their own clothes. So The scene progresses. Spock is merrily, if that's an accurate word to describe Spock at any time, but he's contently playing his lute, and Uhura starts humming away. I mean, Uhura, as we will come to learn, is a passionate singer. She loves to sing, and she's very, very good at it. Nichelle Nichols was very, very notably an accomplished singer in real life, and she doesn't realize she's doing it, and Spock turns to her and he looks annoyed. He's like, oh, she's interrupted me. And it cuts back to Uhura, and we've got some smiling crewmen and women in the background as well, merrily playing 3D chess and having something to eat and all that stuff. Among them is, you got it, it's Leslie Watch. Eddie Paskey's here, getting some rec time. Always good to see Mr. Leslie there. And Uhura apologizes to Spock. She said, I'm sorry, I did it again, didn't I? To which Spock reacts in a really wonderful way. He actually cracks a bit of a smile. And this was very, very common in earlier episodes of Star Trek. We still hadn't got Spock to that cold, logical Vulcan or Vulcanian at this point that he would come to be. But I think this is appropriate to show this side of Spock, and at this point in time, I mean, in the cage, he was not quite so in control of his emotions, or in control of displaying or not displaying those emotions. Strange New Worlds, without getting too much into spoiler territory, most definitely explores that more, and it's nice to see. And as Spock resumes playing, cheeky Janice, she sort of gives Uhura a little cheeky look and then nods over at Spock as if to say, tease him a bit more. To which Uhura happily obliges, and she starts singing a song along to Spock's playing. And the song is actually not massively complimentary in some ways, but is in some other ways. She portrays Spock in this song as a bit of a heartthrob. His eyes and his ears could rip your heart from you, but it's also more than a little bit derogatory towards Spock, and a little bit racial, shall we say, if you look back on it in that context. Whose devil's ears and devil's eyes, it's not very kind. And if Spock were not the man he is, if this was a human, he might react well, as somebody else reacts to a song in a few moments when they enter the room, and we'll get to that. But overall, this is a wonderful exchange. Uhura sings beautifully. Spock plays his lute stroke lyre beautifully, and it's a really, really wonderful scene that I really enjoy. And towards the end of that performance, Charlie walks into the rec room. You'll recall that Janice had encouraged him to meet her there later on, and he was never going to pass up that opportunity given his emerging feelings for Janice. And the performance continues and winds up, and at the end, everyone applauds, and Janice encourages Uhura to go again, one more time. Uhura more than happily obliges again, and she starts singing a song about Charlie, and she references the obvious attraction between Charlie and, one way, from Charlie to Janice. And it's a bit awkward, to say the least, and Uhura really should have known better to tease him. She does. Charlie doesn't like it. He's sat shuffling cards next to Janice, and the look on his face is not a happy look at all. Janice sort of laughs a bit playfully alongside him, and when Uhura finishes the song, Charlie gives one of his looks. He doesn't roll the eyes into the back of the head this time, but the impact of doing so clearly makes Uhura choke up. It's as if she's choking, can't get her words out, and she's in obvious discomfort. So this passes. Charlie, it's now very clear that he has some powers. He can influence people and objects. And we think back to that early exchange with the Antares, where they were initially reluctant to talk, but then Charlie rolled his eyes back and they were suddenly very talkative and in a very positive way about Charlie. So Charlie releases his grip on Uhura here, and the recreation merriment goes on. Now, Charlie does a bit of a card trick, and everyone's impressed. And Charlie laps up the appreciation. He loves this attention and the positive attention that he's getting, and he wants to show off a bit to Janice here. and he says, I can do a lot of tricks, and he lays out 3 cards face down, and he encourages Janice to flip them over, and she does, and wouldn't you know it, the cards change from normal playing cards into 3 images of Janice, which again is a massive red flag. Genuinely, how did Charlie do that? And she does ask him this. Well, how did you do that? And he continues to do some tricks. He changes them back into cards. He picks up one card and then he throws it away, and then it appears inside Janice's tunic. She gets a cheeky look on her face and takes it out. Everyone applauds, and that's the end of the recreation scene. I really love this scene. So next, we cut to a scene in the corridors of the Enterprise, and Kirk is talking to one of the chefs from the ship's galley, and Kirk reveals here that on Earth today is Thanksgiving, so we've got synthetic meatloaf for the crew to celebrate Thanksgiving, and Kirk encourages his chef to make it look like turkey. I want it to look like turkey. And the crewman nods and seems happy to oblige. And Charlie appears, and it's important to note at this point that Kirk is in a different uniform now. He's changed from his green wraparound tunic into his more familiar yellow stroke gold uniform. You can see the detail on this uniform in this shot really well, actually. You can see that there's a zipper that goes from the left collar of Kirk's uniform all the way down to his sort of abdomen area. So it's a very long zip, and I must admit that's a detail I hadn't particularly noticed before until I started screenshotting these and and observing them in more detail. So really cool. But Charlie has come to ask Kirk about the incident with Janice, which is presumably the day before now. It's now the next day because Kirk is in a change of clothes. And Charlie explains what he did, and Kirk awkwardly doesn't quite know how to explain it. It's one thing man to man, but man and woman is another thing. And it's funny. And Kirk is more than a little bit awkward about trying to explain the birds and the bees, if you like, to this young man who is certainly very, very aware of the female of the species, shall we say. And Kirk has a call from the bridge, and apparently Captain Raymart from the Antares is calling. So Kirk responds, says, I'm on my way to the bridge now, Lieutenant, and Charlie asks if he can go with Kirk, to which Kirk initially says, no, I don't think so. And Charlie says, reassuringly, I won't get in the way, and Kirk says, oh, all right then. And they enter the turbo lift. Now, Charlie appears agitated at the fact that the Antares is calling, and this is important. So what's also important is just remember, Kirk's getting into this turbo lift with Charlie. He says to Uhura, I'm on my way to the bridge now, Lieutenant. Kirk is wearing his gold uniform, his gold yellow standard uniform. Cuts to the next scene. We're on the bridge. Spock is with Uhura at the communications station. Uhura is trying to chat with the captain of the Antares. The channel is not too clear. Kirk and Charlie enter the bridge. Miraculously on that turbolift journey, Kirk has somehow managed to change from his yellow standard uniform into his green wraparound tunic. Now this is staggering to me that in all the years I've seen people talk about goofs in Star Trek, I don't think I can ever recall once anybody picking up on this, and it's absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a goof. It's like, how could this possibly have happened unless Kirk could somehow said to Charlie, oh, actually, on the turbolift journey, I want to go change. Hang on a minute. Come with me. I'll quickly go and change my shirt. Then we'll go to the bridge. But there you go. Let me know if you noticed that when you watched this episode for the very first time or in subsequent viewings. But anyway, green tunic again it is. For whatever the reason, Kirk goes over to the communication station. You can hear Captain Raymart anxiously saying, I must speak to Captain Kirk. And Kirk acknowledges, Kirk here, Captain Raymart. And then the channel starts breaking up again. And Charlie's looking very concerned from behind, and then it gets cut off. Nothing is getting through anymore. And as Kirk and Spock are sort of pondering this, and Uhura, Charlie mentions to Kirk, it wasn't very well constructed. which is an interesting comment for someone in Charlie's position to randomly make about that ship. And Kirk looks back at Charlie and says, "You think something happened to the Antares?" And Charlie doesn't really acknowledge that. Spock then says that on his sensors he can see debris, and Kirk pushes back and said, "What about the Antares?" To which Spock replies, "Captain, the debris is the Antares. And we have lost a ship with 20 men aboard," which is something that we all know by now Kirk is going to react very, very strongly to. Before he has the chance to do so in any way, shape, or form, he gets a call on his intercom on his captain's chair, which he answers, and the voice says, "Captain Kirk from ship's galley." He says, "I put meatloaf in the ovens, as you instructed. There's turkeys in there now, real turkeys." Charlie lets out a little cackle, and Kirk sort of says, "Chief of you," and Charlie walks away. And I think Kirk's implying that the chief of the galley has been sipping a little something alcoholic and is a bit merry. But an important little bit of trivia here is that the voice of the chief of the galley, or the chef, is actually none other than the great bird of the galaxy himself, Gene Roddenberry, creator of Star Trek. He voiced this particular dialogue, and wonderful it is to hear good old Gene himself. So we cut to the next scene, or the next act. We get a gorgeous shot of the remastered Enterprise here, and we then cut to the rec room area again, where we see that Kirk and Spock are having one of their own games of chess. Now, it becomes a bit of a running gag throughout Star Trek that Spock, chess master as he is, with his logic, somehow cannot defeat Kirk at chess. And this proves to be the case again here. They're discussing Charlie at this point, and Spock is rightly expressing his concern to Kirk that Charlie seemed to know something was going to happen to the Antares before it happened, and his suspicions that Charlie may even be responsible for what happened to the Antares. And Kirk's a bit defensive about this for the most part for now, and he says, "I call that a pretty long reach for evidence, Mr. Spock," just as Charlie happens to enter the recreation room with a smile on his face. Charlie always seems to have a bit of a smile on his face, and inevitably, as Charlie approaches, Spock logically says, "And again, check. Your game is off," he'd previously said. But Kirk has the better of Spock once again in chess and moves his piece, and wouldn't you know, checkmate. To which Spock graciously acknowledges, "Your illogical and emotional approach to chess is quite bizarre," to which Kirk merrily replies, "I prefer to call it inspired." And Kirk leaves Charlie in the hands of the ship's chess master, and Charlie and Spock are going to have a little bit of a game. Spock tries to explain the principles of 3D chess to Charlie, and Charlie sort of rudely cuts him off and says, "I know the game, let's play." And they start moving some pieces, and it's over very quickly. Charlie is very rash and he makes a mistake. Spock calls him out on this and said, "That was a mistake, Charlie," to which Charlie defiantly says, "No, it wasn't." Spock then calmly moves his piece and calls checkmate. And Charlie reacts very, very negatively to this and says, "No, it wasn't." He's very aggressive. Spock calmly stands up and said, "If you'll excuse me," and walks away. And we get Charlie doing one of his famous facial expressions here. He's summoning what is now clearly his abilities, his powers, and he shrinks the white chess pieces on the board down to crushed versions of themselves. He leaves his black pieces intact, and he crushes Spock's white pieces in a fit of rage. The next scene we see is Charlie walking around the corridors, and Janice is walking by with another female crew member who turns out to be named Yeoman Tina Lawton, third class, I think Janice says. And she wants to introduce Tina to Charlie. And she says, quite kindly here, she thought that Charlie might appreciate being around someone his own age, because Tina is a bit younger than Janice. Charlie very rudely dismisses Tina and says, I want to talk to you. And Tina walks away, feelings hurt a bit. Excuse me, I must be wanted somewhere. Janice reacts negatively, saying, Charlie, that was really rude. And Charlie then opens up and reveals the extent of his true feelings for Janice. I don't need her, I only want to talk to you. And he pours out his heart, saying how he feels about her. And it's very, very awkward. I don't know how the conversation actually completes, because we cut away from it and we go to a scene on the bridge where Janice has presumably immediately gone to tell Captain Kirk of the exchange. And she's very, very upset about this. And the upshot of the conversation is that Kirk agrees to talk to Charlie on Janice's behalf, to warn him off and talk to him about the inappropriateness of the situation. And we cut very quickly to that actual next scene, which is in Kirk's quarters. And Kirk invites the ever-smiling Charlie into his quarters. Kirk has the chess pieces from earlier on in the rec room scene on his desk in his quarters. And actually, we've never really commented on Kirk's quarters before, and they're pretty standard throughout the whole 3 seasons of Star Trek. And he's got his desk area in front of his sleeping area, and he's got some ornaments and decorations behind there. He's got some books, a lot of books. We've got a basket or a box of some sort there and a statue, and we've got some reports and paperwork there on the side. We've got his desk computer there, and we've got something on the desk which I really don't know what it is. It looks like some sort of, I genuinely don't know what it is, this sort of brown and white thing, but if you know what that is, do tell me. And then we've got the chess pieces, and Kirk challenges Charlie in a seemingly innocent way. Says, Charlie, do you notice anything unusual or happened to these chess pieces when we were playing with them earlier today? Charlie denies all knowledge of this, and they go into the conversation about Janice. And this is a real man-to-man talk between Charlie and Kirk here, and Kirk explains to Charlie that things in relationships between people have to be two-sided. It's one thing how you feel, but it's another thing how the other person feels. And Charlie doesn't want to accept this at all. He says, but she could love me. She could love, and Kirk says, no. And it's no fun realizing the fact that there are a million things in the galaxy you can have and a million things you can't. You might not like it, but that's the way things are. And I think Kirk does a good job of being an authority figure, a father figure to Charlie here. And at this point, although frustrated and on the verge, Charlie does seem to take Kirk's words in, because he says, what am I going to do? It's like he's acknowledging the fact that he has to go along with Kirk's way of thinking. And Kirk says, you move on, you move forwards. And at this point, Kirk decides that it might be a good idea for Charlie to let off a bit of steam. And he says, come with me. And he takes him to the ship's gymnasium, which, to my knowledge, this is the first and only time we ever see the gymnasium in the 3 series of Star Trek. I'm racking my brains now, and I can't immediately think of another time we see this set. I may be proven wrong, but for now, I don't think that I can recall that. And we see 2 crewmen doing a bit of an exercise, sort of fighting each other with some sticks. And we can see Kirk doesn't waste any time getting his shirt off. Kirk loves to go shirtless. And he's doing so again, despite the fact that other crew members here are typically wearing exercise gear on their top halves and bottom halves. Kirk's sort of showing Charlie how to take a fall. He encourages Charlie to have a go. Charlie has a couple of goes, and his first attempt is a bit clumsy, and Kirk says, go on, try it again. And he does better on the second attempt, to be fair. And next, Charlie protests a little that he wants to learn how to fight, and Kirk says, well, one step at a time, Charlie. First, before I can do that, before I can teach you how to fight, I've got to teach you how to take a fall. And to demonstrate this, Kirk summons over another crew member who's working out beside them, a guy called Sam. And he says, hey, Sam, let me borrow you for a couple of quick throws. And to demonstrate this to Charlie. So Sam throws Kirk, and Kirk takes the landing beautifully. You'd expect nothing less. And then Kirk nods over to Charlie and says, there you go, nice and simple. Now I'll throw him. And he does so. After which he encourages Charlie to try it. And it's a bit of a thumbs down from me what happens next, because Kirk moves from being a guiding figure here into showing off a bit and showing how easily he can disable Charlie and pin him to the mat with very little effort at all. Charlie's rather pathetic efforts against Kirk to get him off his feet are exactly that. And it's humiliating for Charlie. And Kirk probably should have known better. Maybe he was thinking, I'm giving Charlie a bit of tough love here, a bit of a lesson, but it doesn't work out very well. And Charlie is not appreciative of this. Sam, the workout partner, is sat in the corner now, and he finds it all very, very amusing, and he laughs. And Charlie looks over at him and says, don't laugh at me. And then he repeats in a louder tone, don't laugh at me. And he gestures with his eyes, and in a split second or so, Sam disappears. And Kirk, the look on Kirk's face at this moment is priceless. The realization of what he is dealing with. He has, from his perspective now, lost a crewmate. And he is absolutely horrified, looking over at that empty chair with only Sam's towel left. And Kirk remains calm here, which you'd expect nothing less, because Kirk is Kirk. Any lesser person would be shouting and screaming and climbing the walls at this point, but Kirk remains in charge. He's sternly looking at Charlie, hands on hips. Charlie replies, I didn't want to do that. He made me do that. He wasn't kind. Kirk pushes him, challenges him. What did you do with him? Charlie is evasive. Kirk then goes over to the intercom in the gym and calls for 2 security people to come down, and they oblige, and they arrive very quickly. They arrive almost instantly, one of which is our old friend Lieutenant Brent, usually wearing blue, but today in security red, with the little orange sash and the phaser attached to it. What I'll note here as well is that these 2 crewmen, Brent and his unfamiliar colleague, I don't instantly recognize him, seemed, I don't know if it's just the shadowing of the shot, but they seem to have different coloured trousers on. Brent's is very, very black, whereas his colleagues seem to be more of a lighter shade, sort of between black and grey, or maybe there's a hint of blue to them. Charlie does not look pleased to see them arrive. Kirk tells Charlie that they will take him back to his quarters. He's going to be confined there. And Charlie resists, and he uses his powers to put the security officers in pain, and they fall to the floor. Brent grabs his phaser and aims it at Charlie. Charlie makes the phaser disappear, as you can see in the shot here, which is a really cool shot. Now, Kirk isn't losing a beat here, even though he's clearly keenly aware of the threat that Charlie poses to him and all of his crew right now. He says to Charlie calmly, go to your quarters. And he's banking on the respect that Charlie is built for him as that father authority figure. And Charlie replies, I won't let them hurt me. You can't make me do this, or words to that effect. And Kirk then says, go to your quarters or I'll pick you up and carry you there. Charlie gives in, and he goes with Brent and his colleague. And Kirk gets a call from the bridge saying that all ship's hand phasers have disappeared. And given what we've just witnessed in the gym scene, which is pivotal in this episode, I don't think Kirk is surprised at that statement. Really, really great scene. I love this. Next scene, we are in the briefing room with our big 3. We've got Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in there debating what they're going to do about this situation. And it's very much McCoy and Spock's opinion that Kirk still has an element of authority with Charlie, and they encourage him to maintain that for as long as he can. And that's pretty much all they have to go on in this scene. It's a situation on a finely balanced edge of a cliff. And Charlie arrives in the briefing room, at which point Kirk challenges him openly, finally. Charlie, are you responsible for what happened to the Antares? And Charlie calmly answers yes. There was a warped baffle plate on one of their hull plates. I made it go away. That's now out in the open, and the concern generated in this scene is palpable. We can feel the tension building, that they're dancing around Charlie now. They've got this all-powerful young adolescent human being who I think Kirk describes him at one point as he's a boy in a man's body trying to be an adult, but with the adolescent in him getting in the way, and he's got all these powers and he's out of control, and it's only going to get worse. So they quickly get up to the bridge, and this is based on the realization from that briefing that Kirk vocalized that they have a bigger problem than just the Enterprise. We can't let somebody like Charlie with his abilities anywhere near a whole Earth Colony 5. So they go to the bridge and they try and change course. Kirk instructs Uhura to contact Earth Colony 5 so he can brief them on the situation. Not only can they not change course, but as Uhura is trying to contact Earth Colony 5, her console explodes pretty much in her face, and she reacts and falls to the floor in some pain. Kirk dashes over to assist his wounded officer, and she seems to be largely okay, though, thankfully. She announces her puzzlement that console shouldn't just react like that. She checked it herself not 15 minutes ago. Then the navigator calls Kirk over and tells him that they cannot change course. And it's very, very obvious that it's Charlie doing this, because seconds later he appears on the bridge, and he's now wearing a different costume, actually. He's now wearing something very, very similar to Kirk's wraparound tunic, but in an orange shade. And I do believe, from memory and reading some trivia about this costume, that it was maybe a prototype design for what would ultimately become Kirk's alternative wraparound tunic, and it wasn't the final version, so they're using it as a costume for Charlie here. So Kirk hasn't noticed Charlie coming onto the bridge just yet, I don't think, and he challenges Spock on this. He asks for his science officer's analysis of the situation, in which Spock starts to speak and respond, but then starts citing nursery rhymes. He says, "I'm a tiger burning bright in the forest of the night," or all sorts of nonsense starts coming out of Spock's mouth as he's trying to speak, and he's clearly being controlled like a puppet at this point. Then it's definitely Charlie doing this, and Charlie looks over at Kirk and says, "Oh, I can make him say anything," and he teases Spock, saying, "Very nice, Mr. Ears." And it's very, very uncomfortable, and Kirk and Spock and everyone else look back at Charlie, looking very, very helpless at this point. It's very, very clear that they have no answer to this. How do they get past somebody who can do these things? It's the scene setting for the predicament that our crew are in here is very, very well conveyed by the acting and the responses to what is happening to them. McCoy appears on the bridge wearing a sickbay tunic, and he says, "What the devil's going on up here?" I'm talking to Spock 1 second, and then he starts rambling mad nursery rhymes, which is classic Bones. Kirk goes over to confront Charlie, and Charlie isn't really hiding anything anymore. He's blatantly saying, "You're trying to change course, Captain. You can't do that. I want to get to Earth Colony 5 as quickly as possible." And off the bridge he goes. And Spock says to Jim, he'll soon reach a point where he won't back down. And Kirk acknowledges this. He says, "I know." And we cut then to Charlie, who's left the bridge. He comes out the turbo lift. He's walking through the corridors now. He's looking very, very angry. and he bumps into Tina Lawton, poor old Tina, who's not had the best of times in her interactions with Charlie. And she looks over at him kindly and says, "What's wrong, Charlie?" Charlie promptly does his eye thing and turns her into an iguana, which is, well, at best, most unkind. And off he storms again. And this is the first of many such examples that we'll see of Charlie doing very, very nasty things to our intrepid crew of the Enterprise. Now, we do cut next to a scene of Janice, who's in her quarters. A thumbs up from me here that we finally see someone in their own quarters and their own recreation time wearing not a uniform, and she's wearing this pink gown. I don't know if this is meant to be casual wear or if it's evening sleepwear, if you like. Not sure, but she's sat there. It seems like she's working in her spare time. She seems like she's working on a report. No rest for the Janice. In walks Charlie. He walks in with one hand behind his back. Janice is not best pleased at this. She asks him, "What do you want, Charlie?" And he says, "You." And he produces a flower, and the scene cuts, and we get a glorious shot of the remastered Enterprise before we get back to the scene with Charlie and Janice in her quarters. He says, "I only want to be nice to you. I only want to talk to you." And she says, "Get out, Charlie." And she discreetly puts her hand behind her back and presses an intercom button. Kirk hears this on the bridge. It's a magic button, that, I think, Janice pressing this button in her quarters, and it magically gets to the captain's chair intercom. I don't quite know how that works. Maybe the yeoman does have a hotline to the captain. I guess that would make sense. Kirk reacts immediately, hearing that Charlie is pestering Janice again in her quarters. Goodness knows what he thinks he can do about it, but what else can he do? He rushes to his yeoman's aid, summons Spock, and they run off. And I love this pause that I get here of this scene of Kirk and Spock exiting the bridge. I've caught them sort of mid-run, and it reminds me very, very much of the sort of stills you get in comics. I remember my fondness for reading some of the Star Trek, especially DC comics in the mid to late 80s and early 90s, and you would get shots like this in the comics of our crewmates in action. It immediately made me think of a comic scene, so I really loved that pause, that shot there. And Kirk and Spock get down to Janice's quarters. In they come. Again, it seems like anyone can walk into anyone's quarters at any time, which is, I mean, how are you going to stop Charlie, right? But here's another example. Kirk and Spock just seemingly barge in. There's no obvious computer override door lock. In they go. Charlie immediately sees them and disables them. He powers them against the back of the wall with his powers. He just by glancing at them, and puts them down on the floor with just a look. Janice then slaps Charlie, and Charlie reacts. He does his eye thing, and in a fit of rage, he makes Janice disappear. He looks over at Kirk and Spock on the floor and said, "See what you made me do? She wasn't nice to me." And this is one of Charlie's repeated lines. "That wasn't nice. You're not nice to me. You'll be sorry for that." And he gets more and more aggressive as these things progress. He then puts Kirk through a bit more pain and then lets him up. And Charlie then reveals an important fact. He reveals that he needs Kirk to control the Enterprise, Kirk and his crew to control the Enterprise for him, because it's a bigger ship than the Antares. Charlie gives his hand away a bit here. He says, running the Antares was easy, but the Enterprise is not like that. It's bigger. I need you, so you better do what I say. Kirk gets up and he says, Mr. Spock looks over to his first officer, and Spock says, "My legs, they're broken." And Kirk looks over at Charlie and says, "Let him go." And Charlie says, "No, I won't." And then Kirk, again, doesn't back down. He's still using that small measure of respect that he feels he still has from Charlie, that level of authority. And he says, "Let him up, because I'm telling you to, because you need me to run the ship and I need him." And it's a powerful scene, a powerful moment. And Charlie relents and lets Spock up. And then we quickly cut to a scene in the corridor. And this scene I really, really hate. Massive, massive thumbs down from me. And they're at a console here which says atmospheric system on it, which is not really what this apparatus is meant to do, to be honest. But anyway, Spock is setting up something with this crewman here. And Kirk and Charlie walk by. Charlie's commenting that he had to freeze him just for the look on his face. evidently talking about another encounter with a disrespectful crew person. But Charlie walks into this room that's beyond this control panel, and in he goes, and he says, "You're not coming in?" Kirk shakes his head, and then he nods at Spock. Spock activates the control. Charlie tries to walk back out, and there's a force field in place. Now, this is something I believe is quite unique. The way this works, it's a combination of transparent doors with a force field sort of built into them. This is not the kind of force field that we would come to see in later episodes in Briggs and so on and so forth. And Charlie falls down. And the reason Kirk and Spock should have known better by this point. They think that putting Charlie in a Brig type situation is going to stop him. This is my biggest thumbs down of this episode. What a pointless waste of a scene, because Charlie basically falls to the floor, does his eye thing, he makes the whole wall disappear, and Kirk and Spock are looking where the wall was, looking confused and astonished. Charlie then freezes them, stands by Kirk and said, "You'll be sorry you made me do that. Just you wait, you'll be sorry." And Charlie then goes on a big rampage throughout the decks of the Enterprise. He encounters a female crew member who is, I believe, that same female that we saw a couple of episodes ago in the Man Trap. She's the one wearing the different female version of the uniform with the tunic top and the trousers. And she comes out of presumably her quarters. She has the misfortune of walking past Charlie. He glances back at her, and then a few seconds later we see that this young woman, her hands have changed to shriveled and old, and we pan up and we see that she has been transformed into an old lady, and she screams. Charlie continues his rampage. He walks through the Enterprise corridors and he goes past some laughing crew members. What on earth is to laugh about in this tense situation on board now? I'm really not sure. I can't imagine anybody would be this jovial in these circumstances. Surely the news of Charlie's takeover of the ship and what he can do has reached everyone by now. It clearly hasn't with this group of people, and they pay the price. And he says to them, "No laughing," shakes his head around and walks away. And then we get the most terrifying scene of what Charlie has done, presumably to this whole group, but at least to this one young female crew member whose face has disappeared. She no longer has eyes, a nose, and a mouth. She's just going, and oh, it's awful, absolutely awful. We cut to the bridge next, and Charlie is there in control. He's at the helm position, and he's laying in a course for Earth Colony 5 again, and Uhura is saying there are some signals trying to get through here, but I can't hear them. They're definitely reaching us, but I can't hear them. And Kirk challenges Charlie on this and said, "Is that a signal that you're sending out, and or one that is coming in and you're blocking?" And Charlie says, rather arrogantly, but in firm control at this point, "It's my game, Captain. You have to find out." Charlie goes off, leaves the bridge again, says, "You can have this now. I've blocked on course for Earth Colony 5 again." He goes down to the lower decks again in a rage. Female crew member gets in his way. He gives her a bit of a glance. I don't think he does anything to her here. I think he gets away with it. She gets away with it, rather, and he moves on. And we cut back to the bridge, and Kirk's looking, he's pacing, he's frustrated, and he says, "This is enough. I'm going to take him on." Spock and McCoy caution him and say, "This is out of the question. You can't do that. He's firmly in control now. You've lost any measure of authority that you once had in this situation." And Spock agrees, out of the question. Then Kirk has a moment of realization. He remembers back to what Charlie had said earlier when he said running the Antares was easy, but I need you and your crew members to do most of the things on the Enterprise for me. And Kirk then realizes, and this maybe cuts back to this moment a few moments ago where he bumped into the female crewmate, but he didn't seemingly do anything to her. And maybe that's more important than I thought, because Kirk comes to the realization, hang on, has he done anything to anyone since he took control? And he postulates the theory that maybe he can't, maybe he's taken on so much that he can't extend his reach any further now, and he's got to ease back on his powers. What they decide to do as a plan is turn on as much equipment on the bridge or on the ship as they can and test him and see if how he reacts to that. Charlie, I think, is hearing this because he suddenly appears on the bridge looking very, very angry again. And he said, I can make you all go away or disappear anytime I want. And then he crosses the biggest line of all. He sits in Kirk's chair. Kirk is not impressed at this at all. He says, get out of my chair, Charlie, and get out of it now. To which Charlie responds, I've got your ship, Captain. And Kirk says, perhaps, but I think you've taken on more than you can bargain for here. And he nods to Spock and McCoy, who start flicking on switches on the various stations. And they move to the science station. They start flicking on more controls, and the ship starts whirring as if the engines are running faster. They go to Uhura station. They do more. Uhura joins them. And I love this. She darts a look back at Charlie, which is just, it says it all. Uhura's annoyance at this arrogant young kid with superpowers is clear to see. She ain't having this anymore. And Charlie is getting frustrated because he's realizing he's been found out, that he can only extend himself so far. Kirk gets up and challenges him. He grabs him out of the chair, throws him to the deck, goes for more. Charlie summons his powers and pushes back, and Kirk falls to the floor. Charlie then says, I'm sorry, you made me do this. He's still got that element of respect for Kirk only. It's clear that he's regretting this. Kirk then summons his strength, jumps up again, is about to punch Charlie in the face when Uhura says, there's something coming through, there's something happening. And then Janice mysteriously reappears on the bridge. Now this is, it's good that Janice is back, right? But it's also a bit of a thumbs down for me. It's like, why just Janice? And why is she reappearing on the bridge? And we'll get to that in a minute, why that's important. But she's obviously puzzled. And she's like, oh, Captain, where am I? What am I doing here? And why am I dressed like this? And Kirk reassures her, it's all right, Yeoman. And next, we see a ship appear on the view screen, a very shimmering, shiny green ship that we can barely make out. It looks like an energy field more than anything. It looks almost transparent in its greenness. And Charlie is not pleased about this at all. He screams out. He screams, no! And then a green face appears on the bridge, of a human-looking face. And the image of this old man starts talking to them. He says, I have taken my form from hundreds of years or centuries ago so that I can communicate with you. And Uhura has relayed to them at this point that she's received a message saying that they are from Thesis. This is the planet where Charlie was discovered. And it's interesting that these are clearly a race that are very, very powerful. And it's interesting that this being has taken a form that they had centuries earlier. They've evolved past that flesh and blood into something way more now. And this figure relays to them that they had noticed too late that the boy had gone. They hadn't realized, which is a bit of a thumbs down, because if they were this all-powerful race, surely they had supreme awareness of this young lad who was in their charge. It seems unlikely, but it's a storytelling piece, isn't it? And the Thasian basically says to Kirk that we need to take him back. There's no way he can be among your people. Kirk, to his credit, pushes back here and said, the boy belongs with his own kind, to which the Thasian responds, impossible. And Kirk adds, well, we can teach him not to use his powers. The Thasian replies, we gave him the power so he could survive. He will use it always, which is interesting. I can agree with that, but surely if the Thasians are that powerful, they could take the power away from Charlie, but seemingly they can't. Seemingly he's got it. They can't take it away from him. He will always use it. So this then escalates into Charlie panicking, realizing his time's up, realizing that he can't do anything against the collective power of the Thasians, and that they're going to take him away. And he starts pleading. His attitude changes to one of begging and don't let them take me away. They're not like you. They can't feel, they can't love, not like you, Janice. And Janice still, this is what I love about the crew's reaction here. After all he's done to them over the past few days, they all still have a measure of sympathy for Charlie here, despite his arrogance, despite everything he's done. And it's shows their humanity here, that they feel for him despite everything he's put them through. Now, during this, I did say I'd get back to this. It's important to note that the Thasian says to Kirk that we were too late to restore the Antares. We couldn't do anything about that, but we have restored your ship and your crew to you. So we can take to mean that Janice mysteriously appears on the bridge rather than her own quarters. I'm guessing that means that Sam is back in the gym. Why he didn't appear on the bridge, I don't know. From a storytelling point of view, it makes sense, right? Because Janice is a main character, so she naturally appears there. She's part of the story. So storytelling purposes, it makes sense. We can presume that that poor female crew member has got her face back, that Tina Lawton is no longer a lizard, and that other female crew member is a young woman again. So we move on, and Charlie keeps begging right till the very end, I want to stay, 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 and he disappears. Uhura reports Charlie's back on the Thasian ship. They signal that they are leaving. She shows this sense of regret. Even only moments ago, she had this look on her face of anger, annoyance, resoluteness that we're going to stop you and we're going to get you for this. But now everyone is very, very upset about what they've just witnessed. And it is tragic. They are selling the tragic nature of this very well, all of our actors here, that this is a tragedy, what actually has happened here, and that Charlie has to go back and live alone. Not alone, but with the Thasians, but not with his own kind, and he never can. And that moment of realization is beautiful, really beautiful. It's all over now. Kirk says this to Yeoman Rand. He says, don't worry, Yeoman, it's all over. She comes down and stands next to him. And the episode ends. And we see that this episode is directed by Lawrence Dobkin. As ever, I've looked up this individual director, and he only directed this one episode. Only one Star Trek episode, as is often the case with our directors. I've also highlighted here that the teleplay was by D.C. Fontana, and this is the first time I've noticed this on any of the credits on the episodes that we've reviewed so far. Dorothy Fontana, or DC as she would go by, for the very reason that in this day and age, women writers did not get the respect that they deserved. It was they had to work many, many times more harder than their male counterparts to get any sort of recognition. And to get that, they had to drop their actual full name for just so they wouldn't be perceived as a female, which is ridiculous. Even to the point in recent times, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Harry Potter became a thing, you'll all know the name J.K. Rowling. She had to write under that name rather than her name of Joanne. So times did not move very quickly between the 60s and the late 90s. So that's why DC Fontana. But what a name in Star Trek, and we'll hear her name many, many more times again as we go through these episodes. We get into the credits and we see that this episode, the music was composed and conducted by Fred Steiner, who we've seen conduct music for other episodes so far in season 1. So the last couple of episodes, the original theme music composer Alexander Courage had done those episodes, but we're back to different composers here. And the music in this episode for me is very, very good themes. I really, really enjoyed the music in this episode, particularly. It's one of my favorite scores. So let's get to the rating of this episode on IMDb. So IMDb gives this particular episode a solid 7 out of 10. And what do I think of this one? I think that's about right. I'm not going to change that. For my own score, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 as well. Do let me know your own score also that you feel this episode deserves. So there we go. There we go, folks. Another episode in the bag. I really enjoyed reviewing that one. It's a good, solid episode. I mean, it's not outstanding. It's not terrible. It's solid. I really like the story very, very much. Let me know what you think of this episode in the comments. Let me know if I've missed any particular trivia that you were crying out for me to mention, and I've not done so. And if you've enjoyed the video, please do give me a thumbs up. Do hit that subscribe button as well. That's going to help me to grow the channel and reach a wider audience, which I really want to do because I want to engage with the Star Trek community and talk more about what is a real passion for me. I hope that comes across in what you've seen. So we'll leave it there. Thank you for watching. Do stay safe, take care, travel well, and above all else, and I'm going to modify this here because I don't necessarily think that you have to live long to prosper. So I'm going to sign off with my own version of that greeting from now on, which is live well and prosper. Take care. Bye-bye.